Hello, and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. I'm Carolyn McDonald, and I'm here with Ava Porter and Farhad Akhmetov, directors of the film Wild Honey. Thank you for being here with us today, guys.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Let's take a look at a clip of the film.
Мне не дал дrum.
Телевуд — это очень древний народ, которые в своих генах и в традициях своих несут древние знания. Знания о чем? О человеке и о мироустройстве, и как надо жить в этом мире.
So for those who may not have seen the film, can you give us a brief synopsis of what it's about?
Yeah, Wild Honey is basically a musical journey throughout 5 ethnic communities of Russia, from the Black Sea to Siberia.
Great. And tell us what inspired you to make this film?
Well, we both come from musical backgrounds originally. My family were klezmer musicians in Belarus and the former Pale of Settlement. And Farhad, whose family is directly responsible in a sense for this project, were composers in the Soviet Union. His father, Murad, was a composer and ethnomusicologist, and his grandfather was also a very important composer from Bashkortostan. Murad actually did a lot of ethnomusicological work. He was sent by the Moscow State Folklore Commission back to Bashkortostan to record the music of small villages. And he amassed a huge collection, but when the Soviet Union collapsed, these collections, some of them disappeared, some of them were burned, some of them were lost, some of them were transferred. And so we didn't really know where they were. And we came up with this project. Originally, the goal was to find these lost archives. And if we found the lost archives, to carry on this project. And if we didn't, to just sort of recreate the archive essentially. And so that was the impetus for the project originally, and then it kind of went from there.
I remember when I was 12, my father took me on one of these expeditions for an entire summer, and we went from village to village recording ancient songs and music, and this memory inspired us to go and recreate the feeling that I had when I was a teenager.
So tell us, how did you discover the subjects for this film?
So we started our journey in Moscow. We met with Katerina Dorohova, who had worked with Murad, with Farhad's father, at the Folklore Commission, and had actually single-handedly saved the archives. It's an incredible story. But she had saved the archives and transported them to St. Petersburg, and we were able to track down the entire archive pretty much as soon as we arrived. So this big mystery we thought we would have was just solved immediately, which was very exciting and just beautiful. And from there, we moved to Bashkortostan, and we made a number of connections with musicians and academics and started our research there and our filming there. It was amazing music, of course, and they play a karai flute, which you see in the film in the very first chapter. It's a flute that's played from the side of the mouth. There's a groove that goes into the teeth, and throat singing, and there's singing that happens, throat singing simultaneously. So a karai flutist will play the karai and then throat sing through parts. And we became, of course, very interested in throat singing and sort of began to follow the historical roots and lines of these sort of different styles and techniques and forms, which took us out to Altai, where throat singing, it's one of the places where throat singing is claimed to have originated. And so this was kind of the way this film organically expanded beyond Bashkortostan into various parts of Russia. And so from the throat singing, we were, learning about the history of the Mongols, how they traveled, throughout Eurasia, bringing these traditions and these forms to other cultures and other parts of that that territory. And so this kind of organically blossomed into this 5-chapter film that takes place in different parts across this giant country that's really a continent, right?
What we've learned really quickly when we start talking to all these communities, that they are very different in their religion and traditions. So the Bashkortostan is a largely Muslim republic, and Altaians are largely pagans. And then we kind of questioned, is there a connection between the tradition and music? And then we started looking elsewhere, and we found another Christian group that is a second part of the film called Molokans, and they were Christians, and Cossacks that are Orthodox Christians. And then we paid an homage to Ava's roots, and we sought out a Jewish group that still exists, and that's the fourth part of the film.
So yeah, it's maybe a good time to point out that the film is structured in 5 chapters, moving basically from what we sort of have decided is the most contemporary in terms of religion, right? So Islam, back sort of in time. So through the types of Christianity to Judaism, and then Tengrism, which is the Altaian ancient tradition.
Right. Yeah, let's dig into that a little deeper, because that was so refreshing, the scenes of the women making the pasta, and then going into the family homes, and the woman on the farm that was cussing, and it was just so. Can you talk a little bit about each of those scenes with the women, especially making the pasta, and just because each place the songs were coming out of their activities. I mean, I know it was religious, quote unquote, but yeah, talk about that interaction and experience with that.
Well, this particular community, they're called Molokans, and they are a very close community, and we were lucky to be able to gain their trust, and we lived with them. We had to wear the same kind of clothes, we had to have the same kind of schedule as them. So eventually they opened up to us and became less shy of a camera and allow us to film. They still live as a community, so they have a lot of communal activities throughout weeks and months and on daily basis. So this particular event, when they come together and they basically all the women of the community come together and they make an entire meal for everybody. And during that time, they basically sing the songs that 300, 400 years old, so they haven't changed. So in that sense, we encountered a time machine. We were able to travel in time and see what it was like maybe a few hundred years ago, because they still keeping this tradition.
Wow, that was something. And the family that was with the drinking the vodka, that kind of reminded me of my own family reunion, actually, in the South. I'm from the South, so, and that's why I always say we're so much alike, no matter where we are in the world. Talk about that with them, with the vodka and the parties there.
Yeah, we really had a good time with them. They are basically a group of friends that get together to sing traditional Cossack songs. So they're from this chapter about the Cossacks, and that's an interesting culture that it used to be more defined. They were sort of democratic paramilitary, would you say, really? Yeah, paramilitary communities that emerged, in the sort of borders of Russia. And in order to be accepted, it wasn't based on ethnicity or race or something like that. In order to be accepted, you had to kind of take on the codes of the community, which were being Orthodox Christian, being, what were the other military, being agriculturally based too. So they're farmer communities. And what am I missing?
So all of their songs revolve around basically either either about farming or basically war. So
they would protect the sort of borderlands, right, of the Russian Empire. And today, however, right, it's a different country, it's a different system, and so it's becoming defined as more of an ethnicity than it was originally, because obviously you know, they can't live in their own closed agricultural communities in the same way anymore. And so in trying to sort of redefine this ethnic identity today, the music is a really, really important part. Music had always been important. They'd always sang these songs, especially if the men are off fighting, they've left their families behind. And so today, this is the part of the tradition that is one of the most defining, most definitive factors that allows them to still feel connected to each other and connected to their ancestry. And so this particular group that you mentioned is basically a group of friends from the same village who get together regularly and eat and drink and sing and have a really great time. And it's so great. It's as for most, for our American audience, it's I think very often the favorite section. There's something that is so, as you said, so relatable, and also I feel like it's something we all aspire to. They talk about somebody's sick, somebody can't come anymore, somebody's passed away. So it's like the depth of human experience and the sadness, but at their age, they still want to get together and enjoy life and enjoy each other and sing songs. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It was really, really one of my favorite. I had a lot of favorite moments in the film, but definitely was the one that just, you find the one that reminds you of your Uncle Rudolph, your own. So, you find it so relevant. So Rhea, you mentioned Russia, this large continent. What was the distance like for you traveling? How much time did you spend shooting the film, and how much time did you spend, in traveling back and forth? Talk a little bit about the logistics.
We started in Moscow, and we right away started our pre-production, finding the scholars, finding the right musicians, finding people who will help us to get into these villages. So that took us about 4 months to do. And then we were still developing those connections, and we started shooting in May of 2017, and we finished in August of the same year. So our production was about 4 months. During those 4 months, we were constantly on trains. We traveled only by trains, and Russia is so big. Sometimes we would have to hop on a train and be for a couple of days on a train. And during those train rides, we would just read and look at the footage that we just shot. So it was actually, we forgot to mention that this is the entire crew that we have. We had a lot of help from the local communities, but as far as the filming crew, it was 2 of us. Eva did all the camera work. I tried to help. So sometimes during our events, I would hold another camera, and sometimes we were able to shoot something. And
all the beautiful drone work is Farhad's.
Right. So we had 2 backpacks, basically, one with camera equipment, one with drone, and then another 2 bags of our personal belongings. And that's how we travel.
And so, yeah, we spent all this, we spent roughly a month. We say sort of a month, give or take, in each community, but not necessarily all at once. So we were kind of bouncing around depending on if there were events we had to get to. For example, the Shaman Ritual had to take place under a full moon. So we were bouncing around on the trains. But do you remember how many miles would you say from Altai to the south of Russia?
Yeah, about 3,000 kilometers, which is about 2,000 miles.
Yeah. So we were, sleeping on trains a lot of the time.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. What a journey. What a journey. You touched on the Shaman Ritual. Talk about that sequence there, because that reminded me again of the indigenous Native American and even South American, that again, there's another favorite of mine personally, but yeah, talk more about that.
We met the shaman that you see in the movie, and we had immediate connection. His son is actually the person who closes the film. That's incredibly gifted musician. His name is Dobrynya.
Mhm.
And we said that we would love to see a real shaman ritual. And basically, he agreed to show us what it would be like. So he went out and seek other shamans for this ritual, and there were some conditions that need to be met: full moon, right location, right people, and basically the ritual was about reunification of three worlds that these people believe that exist: the upper world where the higher powers live, the middle world where we live, and the underground world where the spirits live. So when we were talking to him, he said that these three worlds are out of sync, and because of that, we have a lot of tension in the world, and we have a lot of wars. So it's his role as a shaman to calibrate and re-sing all these three worlds. So this is the ritual that we experienced.
And in those different planes, especially, you know, the sort of upper world and lower world, the influences you're talking about, these indigenous influences from perhaps other continents and countries, they meet each other there, right? So there's a fluidity between all of these influences and all of this music that exists sort of in other places in the immediate moment, or a traditional sort of historical definition of things, right? So in these stories and traditions and rituals, there's an overlap, a merging that happens.
Wow, were there any other tangible connections other than meeting in the other world between Native Americans? Because for me, it was so enlightening, and probably for other viewers as well. I'd never heard associated shaman with Russian culture. I mean, again, you'd heard Native American, especially South American, but this was the first time I associated it or knew about it existed in Russian culture, you know? So were they connecting with Native American Indians in any way that you knew about, or any other cultures off the continent?
After the ritual was performed, the shamans told us that all different other spirits came, and there were a lot of spirits from Northern America who came to witness the ritual and help for them to realign. But this particular area that meet Russia, Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan is very spiritually energized, and they believe that basically it's almost the same people populate that area, that populate a little bit even further to the east and to Alaska, and maybe even to the coast of America. So they do believe that they are relatives in a way.
And there are studies of ancient mitochondrial DNA that do show an affinity between people from this area and some peoples of North America.
Wow, wow, that's so very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And in your travels across this continent and the diverse cultures, what were the were there any common things that you found, like underlying, things that you found that were similar, even though they may have been diverse in terms of their styles and the practices? What were some of the things that you found they had in common?
Everybody, every community that we traveled to and had conversation with said that very important to remember their roots and remember their traditions, and the songs really help them to carry on these traditions and just remember their ancestors. So that was very, very common among all 5 groups.
Yeah, what's really interesting about Russia in general, which is sometimes similar to communities in the United States, but I think for most of us feels different, is that the connection to their traditions is really strong, even within urban dwellers, even within people in Moscow. They still are very connected to their original land. They're connected to they have dachas, which is basically like a sort of country home that they go back to regularly. That's where you spend your summers. And so there's this, again, I use this word, but this fluidity and this connection between, this link both to sort of contemporary global living and then very deep ancient traditions which grow out of the land and being on the land that your ancestors were on. Of course, we have a very different history in this country. But so that was this sort of, really strong connection between all of these groups, even though they speak different languages, have different religions, they all share and they can connect to each other when they meet each other too. And they meet each other in Moscow and they meet each other in other sort of cities and hubs and parts of the country, which they do all the time. They feel like they understand each other. They feel a connection despite having such different backgrounds.
Gotcha. And for you, you just mentioned something about languages, each place you went spoke a different language. Wow. How did you manage with that?
They, well, mostly everybody spoke some Russian, even if it wasn't that strong. They all spoke Russian. And I'm not remotely fluent. I kind of can speak a little. Farhad's it's his original language. So he was able to communicate mostly with most people. If we were in a village that really was remote and people didn't speak Russian, we would have a translator. So in Bashkortostan and a lot of the villages, we had a driver and a guide basically that was able to speak Bashkir, that was able to translate for us and help us out.
So being a music film, and you said that you two were the only crew you had, how did you manage the sound recording? Because it's all really, really wonderful. All the songs are so crisp. So tell me, how did you manage the audio portion?
Yeah, thank you so much. We worked on the audio together most of the time. As Farhad mentioned earlier, I was usually on the camera. Sometimes he'd have a second one, and depending on kind of the configurations of the people that we were working with, I could also do the audio, or Farhad would have to take care of it. But we traveled with a small recorder, a Zoom H6, and we had small microphones, but powerful, that to whatever extent we could, we would set up around the room. We had some small lavalier microphones we would sometimes put on people, but mostly we didn't do that. We felt like we'd have to sacrifice some level of comfort and therefore authenticity. So those could get taped under tables and things. So as we, we had about, what did you say? There's the capsule microphone that goes onto the recorder. And then I'd say we had the two lavs and we had two other microphones. So two other microphones and then the shotgun microphone on my camera. So we had a number of microphones that were small that we were able to set up. And so that really, having that ability to work with that in post made the big difference. And I'll also say that we found an incredible mixer. We're so lucky to have worked with Adam Schmidt on this project. It's he and Kinsey Green, who also helped with some audio post-production and design. They were the only other sort of big players in the production and post-production of this film, and we really owe them both a lot for how great it sounds now.
Great. So tell me, what was the biggest lessons that you learned making this film? I mean, it's an incredible journey. It has to be life-changing. So what would say the biggest lesson you learned from this journey?
For me, probably the biggest lesson that I learned is that it's possible to do something positive if you have enough courage and have enough will to do it. So when we started this project, we wanted to make a film, but we were not sure if we will be able to complete it or what kind of movie is going to be. So we just basically started without knowing, and then we learned so many things once we started, and we were really determined to finish it. So now I'm now I am grateful for this experience because we can now go and start a new project.
Okay.
I think, going off of sort of what Farhad's saying, and I believe Werner Herzog, sort of his advice to young filmmakers, and I'm sure a lot of other, established people say this, is to just get a camera, just get it and shoot, right? And we all tell each other that. I know, Carolyn, you teach and everything, and so do I, and you tell your students that, and it's also, but it's still intimidating, it's still really, it's hard to do that, and we follow that advice, and that's the advice we give to anyone at this point. There's such a focus sometimes on production value and the camera and the gear and the lenses and all of these things that are of course important, and we love all of that, but sometimes it's not possible, or it's not important, or it might even interfere with what you're doing. And so just being openness, I would say, is a big part of that, being open to just grabbing a camera and going. And then also for us in this case, to really be open to the experience, to be open to things changing. We had to really go with the flow a lot. And we had to be open to cultures and communities that we didn't have any prior, experience with or knowledge of, really. And so for me, that was an incredible experience and an incredible lesson, was just to really open ourselves up to whatever was, coming our way.
Oh, great, wonderful. So, well, thanks again for being here with us this afternoon. This has been really wonderful to talk to you. And what's up next for you guys, and where can we follow you on social media?
Our Instagram is @wildhoneydoc. DOC. We post also behind the scenes photos, and we're slowly kind of releasing these other clips and songs that didn't make it into the film. So that's a good place to find us. And in terms of the upcoming projects, we're moving in a slightly different direction now. We're working on a historical narrative. And so, I think that's a slower process. So we're a little ways away from kind of being able to announce anything, but if you keep your eyes out for it, eventually it will it will arrive.
Right. Well, thank you once again for being here with us this afternoon. Really love the film, and look forward to seeing what's next for you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.